Hey guys, welcome back to the Ignite Your Legacy podcast. Today we are talking about New Year's. We got the New Year's ringing in here shortly, and 2020 was a doozy, and 2021 is going to be better for everybody. And we want to include our sons in that. A lot of guys get focused on New Year's resolutions that only really benefit them, their abs, their fitness, their habits. We want to step back just a touch and look at our family as a whole unit in 2021. So the heart behind this podcast is doing just that. I've got a friend here, Williams Espino, that has graciously devoted some time here to sit down with me and talk about that. He's got a little bit more experience than I. He has more sons and more skin in the game, if you will. So I believe there's some wisdom to be gleaned. No pressure, of course, that's what we say here. So I'm going to pass the mic here to my good friend Williams Espino.
Tim, I am so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. The idea of planning for the new year is not a new idea. It's something that everybody does. It's something that, we can kind of go back and think about when we were kids and kind of what that looked like for us. As it relates to raising our sons and our daughters, it's kind of one of those things where sometimes we really don't pay attention to. We think about New Year's resolutions as it pertains to us. We think about New Year's resolutions as it pertains to our work. Yeah. Every once in a while, we'll do that with our marriages. Often, we don't do that with kids. And so, I think this topic is very, very timely. As you know, I have 4 boys and a daughter. And we're kind of trying to figure out, okay, what does the next year look like?
Right.
And as you and I were kind of chatting about this topic, I kind of went back to thinking about something that we all do at work. I think if you were to talk to any professional or anybody that has a job, and if you were to ask them about, what goals does your job or does your work have for the next year, they're probably going to be able to tell you a thing or two.
Right.
We oftentimes don't do that with, in the house. And one of the things that I like to think about is trying to think about starting with the end in mind. This is something that we do in our professional jobs.
Sure.
We will start a project and we're like, okay, what will this project look like at the end when it's done? What will success be like?
Yeah.
What will failure be like? Where are the gotchas? All of these things, all of this planning that kind of goes into that.
Sure.
And I feel like sometimes we don't do that at home.
Yeah.
But yet, it would be so easy to do that at home.
It would be. What do we have to do to get to that point?
Yes.
Work backwards.
That's
Absolutely.
right. And so, I think that's kind of the exercise that my wife Angela and I are kind of going through, is trying to figure out, okay, what does the end look like for our kids? The end being, them going to college, being able to move, into their next phase in life from under our roof. And, what does it look like for us to be able to look at our specifically my sons in their eyes and being able to say, hey, you are a man. You have what it takes.
Yeah.
And so this coming year for 2021, I would say that this is part of that entire puzzle.
Sure.
You were kind of joking around about, having New Year's resolutions to lose weight or to do more exercise or whatever. Yeah. And oftentimes, I think the struggle that we get into, or the gotcha that we get into, is that we wind up focusing on these big, huge things.
Right.
And unachievable
right.
Sometimes, right?
Sure.
And so it's like, oh man, like this is such a big, huge thing that I can't even, I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
And I guess what I would encourage your listeners to today is that like those big huge milestones are really, really important, but it's also about the small stuff. The small stuff is what's going to help you build and be able to achieve those big huge milestones. My wife and I were kind of going through this exercise of trying to figure out, hey, when our kids are this age, what does that look like? When they're this age, what does that look like? At what point do we begin having certain conversations with them? Right. At what point do we begin engaging with them more on, finances and helping them understand what a checking account is?
Sure.
Helping them understand what interest is.
Yeah.
Or at what point do we begin talking about things like dating, or some of these other things, and so that if we know that, hey, we're going to do this at 14 or 15 or 16 or 12 or 10, whatever, then we can plan for those things. And that way, from a really, really high level perspective, we have an idea of some of the things that we want to do at each individual age. And so that for the coming year, it's like, okay, what are the small things that we need to work on to help us get ready for that big, huge milestone?
That's good.
My oldest, he's about to turn 14. My youngest, he's 4.5. And so we have a huge spread of age between, for our kids. And so that's something that we kind of have to be intentional about. I guess the thing that I would encourage your listeners to think about is that what I'm really talking about is not something that is weird or something that is unknown to people. As I said, we do this in our professional life.
Sure.
It just takes a little bit more intentionality for us to bring that into our personal life and to engage with our wives to try to figure out, okay, like we have our children, how do we get them to where we're trying to get them to? And so I think that's kind of where we're at today. We're kind of trying to figure out, for 2021, what do we need to do to achieve those big, huge milestones that we're trying to achieve in those respective years of age for our kids.
Sure. And I think as I'm hearing you, I'm seeing each one of your kids as a separate project. Like you almost have to sit down and intentionally think about exactly where you are relationship wise with each one of your kids, and kind of build an idea for the year for each one of the kids. Me personally, with my 10-year-old boy, well, he's starting to get out in the world a little bit more, and it's kind of a scary thing.
Yeah,
he's out in the neighborhood, which is great. He's not sitting at home playing computer games all the time. He's actually getting out and having friends and playing football, and but with that comes there's girls in the neighborhood that he's playing with, and I know they're into TikTok a lot, and he's got a phone, and there's a group chat happening in the phone, and man, we need to monitor that, especially with the phones. I don't know if you other men are hip to the covenant eyes, but that is mandatory to protect your son's phones or daughter's phones as well, your family phone. But monitoring that, and what does that look like, and have we talked about that, and just kind of getting them thinking a little bit differently than the rest of the kids.
Yeah, like you bring up such a great point. I feel like we live in an era where there's so much comparison.
Yeah.
And with kids, it's like, hey, what version of the phone do you have? Do you have the new iPhone 22 or, whatever,
Right.
And so, like, there's a lot of that. And that is such a challenging, it's just really challenging for our kids. And what I would say is that it's also challenging for parents. One of the things that my wife, Angela, and I kind of talk a lot about is this idea of parenting for the next 20 years, not the next 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because quite honestly, when I'm doing everything quick and I'm kind of, parenting, doing a drive-by parenting, it's a very quick,
it takes care of the problem initially.
Yes, but
the present problem.
Right, but it doesn't address the source. And so I think, when you talk about technology and that kind of stuff, helping our children understand the why behind it, helping them understand, really what God's intention is for their, for the season that they're in their life, and kind of what our role as dads is, and really helping them understand the why, I think goes a long way with our kids, and it gives us the ability, gives us the stage to speak life into them. It's not that we're just saying no, but it gives us the ability to help them understand the why behind something.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean that's something that each family, I mean with your wives, we talk about and we discuss, and we come to an understanding together and make sure we're on the same page with what we're offering them, and when, at what age they're actually going to be ready for it. And I'm sure that's definitely on an individual basis. Some kids might be ready earlier than others, and some kids you might want to wait a little bit longer for.
And the other thing that I was going to mention, Tim, that this idea of being intentional with our children, with our sons, with our daughters, I think sometimes this can be overwhelming for some dudes.
Yeah.
I would, in those times, I would encourage men to just kind of pick up the phone and be humble and ask somebody else and be like, hey, what are you doing in this area?
Right.
How are you handling this with your boys or with your, with your children?
Because everybody's going through it.
Everybody's going through it. But it's kind of one of those things where sometimes we allow pride to get in the way, and because of that, it's like, well, they seem to have it all together, so I'm not gonna ask them or whatever because I don't want to feel dumb. The reality is that we're all going through this, and the reality is that whether people realize this or not, we have a community because we're all fathers.
Right.
We're all trying to figure this out, and in many instances, I would say we're trying to do it better than our parents did.
Right.
I don't know if that's good or not, but I think in many instances we're trying to look at, hey, what did our parents do that was good, or what did our parents do that wasn't good, and how do we make it better? And so I would just encourage your listeners that in those times when you're kind of trying to figure out what to do, like, it's okay to pick up the phone and just reach out to somebody else and be like, hey, I'm trying to figure this out. What are you doing?
Right.
Guess what? They may tell you that they may tell you, I was thinking the same thing. I was going to call you to try to figure out what you were doing. Right. Or they may say, hey, you know what? This is the one thing that I'm doing, and you may learn something from that.
Yeah.
Or you may be inspired by that thing to do, to do something different than maybe you've done in the past. I think any time that we get to the end of the year, it's a great time to kind of reset, step back, and really just kind of think about, holy cow, like, this is the biggest job that we're ever gonna have.
Yeah.
How do we be intentional with this? How do we do it in such a way that at the end of the year we can look back and we can be like, yep, all of the things that I wanted to do with the kids, I was able to accomplish. Or, hey, 80% of all of the things that I wanted to do with the kids, I was able to accomplish.
Yeah.
Or maybe 10%, whatever. But we need to be intentional. We need to be doing something. Sure. Not doing anything is not an answer, because this is the biggest, like, that would not be acceptable in our professional lives. Like, it wouldn't.
Yeah.
You would get fired.
Right.
And yet here's the biggest job that we're ever going to have, and sometimes we take it for granted.
Man, that is a good word right there. Absolutely. I mean, at work, you're doing year-end reviews. You're doing there's all these things set up where you are monitoring how jobs are going, how projects are going. You're making money. It shouldn't all be about that dollar. We've got huge projects that God has gifted with us in our own homes that we don't focus on typically that intentionally. So that's good, man.
And the other thing that I would say, Tim, is that it's not only are we in a community with other dudes, other dads.
Yeah.
I would say that sometimes we we're not intentional about having these kind of conversations with our wives, and seeking God in kind of what we're trying to do within our families, and I would say that those are also great places to start. Start with by praying and trying to figure out, okay, God, like, with this kid, what do you want us to do this year?
Right.
And then initiating a conversation with your wife and being like, okay, like, this is what I think we need to do this year to be intentional, and it may be one thing, it may be two things,
Sure.
Like, it doesn't have to be this huge, thing, but, having those kind of conversations with your spouse to make sure that you guys are on the same page, to make sure that you guys are supporting each other, because you know what?
Yeah.
It's not easy. I mean,
Right.
it can be enjoyable, but man, it's work.
It is work.
It is work.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of one of those deals where if you and your spouse can be on the same page, if you guys are praying through this, if you can reach out to other dudes, other dads, to try to be inspired or get ideas, you don't have to do this alone. You can do it with other people. And I think what I would encourage your listeners is to just be intentional.
Sure.
One of the things that I think is more challenging is when you do a project at work and you look at that project and you're like, oh man, this project sucked, or oh man, this project was a success. But you're not able to say why it wasn't good or why it was a success. I would say that that's challenging, and I would say that that's probably something that we should also be intentional with our kids. Like,
Sure.
if things are going fantastic in our home, I think we should be able to say why they're going fantastic in our home. If things are not going fantastic in our home, I think we should be able to say why they're
Sure.
not going fantastic in our home. And it all kind of goes back to that intentionality and all that planning. That we're saying it's the beginning of the year, so let's plan.
Right.
This is an ongoing process, right?
Yes.
It should be an
Yes.
ongoing process, but this is a great time, just because everybody's kind of thinking about this, to just kind of pause and really think about, okay, New Year 2021. I think everybody's excited to get past 2020, right?
Right.
So as we get into 2021, what does that look like for our families? What does that look like for us as dads in leading our kiddos through the new year? And how do we become intentional, while keeping the kind of the end result in mind, and how do we drive towards that target?
That's good, man, that's good. So guys, I just encourage you to do just that. Let's be intentional. Let's prayerfully think about each one of our kids, exactly where they're at. Where are we at with them relationship wise? Where do we want to be at the end of the year, and how do we get there? Make some action steps with your wife. Sit down and actually think about and pray about what that looks like, and how do we grow closer to them as we all grow closer to God in this process and in this year. So, man, Williams, thank you so much for sitting down and having this chat with me. Appreciate you guys for listening, and stay tuned to the next episode. God bless you.